Ladies and gentlemen, today we face a challenge that has become all too common in our modern world. How to navigate relationships with narcissists without losing ourselves in the process. We live in an era where self-interest, power dynamics, and manipulation often dominate. Yet we must remain grounded in our own values and principles. It's crucial that we learn how to engage with individuals who seek to control, belittle, and manipulate us, without compromising our own sense of self-worth. The key to outsmarting narcissists lies not in confrontation, but in cultivating self-awareness and maintaining emotional resilience. Narcissists thrive on attention and control, so if we understand their tactics and learn how to protect our emotional and psychological well-being, we can disarm them without sinking to their level. It's about maintaining clarity in the midst of chaos and rising above the manipulative games they play. The foundation of our approach is simple: focus on what you can control, your responses, your boundaries, and your emotional well-being. When we commit to being authentic to who we are, when we understand our worth, narcissists lose their power over us. When we talk about the importance of knowing your worth, we're diving into something deeply personal, something that forms the bedrock of every interaction we have in this world. Narcissists, by their very nature, are like emotional predators. They thrive on exploiting the insecurities of others to bolster their own fragile sense of self-importance. And this is where the challenge begins. We are surrounded by people who will test our boundaries, push our limits, and try to manipulate our emotions. But if we don't recognize and stand firm in our worth, we risk losing ourselves in the process. Knowing your worth is not about arrogance or vanity. It's about understanding the value you bring to the world and to relationships at a fundamental level. This is an internal compass that guides us through the toughest of interactions. You see, when you truly understand your worth, no one can take it from you. It becomes a shield, protecting you from the emotional upheaval and chaos that narcissists often create. They might try to undermine you, belittle your achievements, or inflate their own sense of superiority. But if you're clear about your value, you won't be swayed by their attempts to diminish you. What's important to remember is that knowing your worth means having a deep understanding of who you are, what you stand for, what drives you, and what values you will never compromise. This understanding comes from within, not from the external validation of others. Narcissists may try to convince you that your worth is conditional, that it's based on how well you perform or how much you conform to their expectations. But your worth, your value, is innate. It's not a prize they can give or take away. It's something you hold within yourself, a core truth that is unshakable. This doesn't mean you have to be perfect or that you have to be immune to self-doubt. We all face moments of vulnerability, times when we question ourselves. But when you understand your worth, those moments don't define you. Instead, they become opportunities for growth. You don't allow them to spiral into a crisis of self-esteem. And here's the thing, narcissists are acutely aware of this dynamic. They can sense when someone is unsure of themselves, when they are struggling to establish their value. That's when they strike, because they know that if they can make you feel small, they can gain control over you. This is where the concept of self-awareness becomes crucial. Knowing your worth isn't just about feeling confident. It's about understanding where that confidence comes from. It's about recognizing your strengths and acknowledging your weaknesses without allowing either to define you. This creates a powerful balance that makes you less susceptible to the emotional games narcissists love to play. If you're secure in who you are, you won't fall for their manipulation tactics. Instead, you'll approach their attempts to control you with a quiet, calm confidence that says, "I don't need your approval to know that I'm enough." It's also important to understand that knowing your worth isn't about competing with others. Narcissists often see the world in terms of winners and losers, and they thrive on the idea of being better than someone else. But when you know your worth, you realize that there's no need to compare yourself to anyone else. Your value doesn't diminish just because someone else might be trying to assert theirs. This is why narcissists can't stand people who are secure in their own worth. They don't have any leverage over them. It's not a competition, It's about being grounded in your own identity and refusing to let anyone else shake that foundation. In any situation where a narcissist tries to make you feel less than, your ability to remain anchored in your own self-worth becomes your greatest asset. You're not going to bend to their will, not because you want to prove them wrong, but because you don't need their approval to affirm your own value. When you know who you are and what you bring to the table, no one can undermine that sense of self. You stand tall, grounded in your own truth, and that is something a narcissist cannot take away from you. Knowing your worth, then, is not just a defense mechanism against narcissists. It's a way to live more authentically, to make choices that align with who you truly are, without fear of being diminished by anyone else's judgments. You set your own standards and allow them to guide you in every decision, every relationship. And when you know your worth, you become the kind of person who draws people to you who recognize your value too. That's when you can outsmart narcissists, because they can't play their games on someone who already knows exactly who they are. Setting boundaries is one of the most powerful tools we have in dealing with narcissists, yet it's often the most difficult one to put into practice. The reason is simple. Narcissists, by their very nature, will challenge, test, and push boundaries at every opportunity. They thrive on chaos and control, and one of the quickest ways they gain influence over others is by crossing lines: personal, emotional, and sometimes even professional. But here's the truth. If we don't set boundaries, we are giving them permission to take from us, to manipulate, and to dictate the terms of our interactions. And that, my friends, is a recipe for losing ourselves. Setting boundaries isn't about being rigid or unapproachable. It's about protecting your energy, your time, and your emotional well-being. It's a clear statement that you are worthy of respect, and that you won't tolerate behavior that diminishes your sense of self. Narcissists often push boundaries because they know that if they can get away with it, they'll gain more control over you. And if you allow them to test your limits repeatedly, you'll find that over time, your sense of self-worth begins to erode. That's why setting boundaries becomes essential, not just as a defense mechanism, but as a way to preserve your own emotional health. Now, setting boundaries doesn't always come naturally, especially if you're someone who is empathetic or conflict-averse. We've been conditioned in many ways to avoid confrontation, to accommodate others, and to keep the peace. But in dealing with narcissists, keeping the peace often means sacrificing your own needs and desires. And this is where the shift needs to happen. Setting boundaries is not about being selfish. It's about being self-aware. It's about saying, I matter, and that your needs, your space, and your peace of mind are just as important as anyone else's. When you set clear boundaries, you're taking control of the situation and ultimately of your life. One of the key aspects of boundary setting is consistency. Narcissists will test your boundaries repeatedly to see if you're truly committed to enforcing them. They'll try to make you feel guilty for saying no, or they'll attempt to manipulate you into questioning your own decisions. But here's the reality. The moment you give in, even once, you send the message that your boundaries aren't firm. And narcissists will use that as an opening to push further. The key to maintaining your boundaries is consistency. You don't have to be confrontational or aggressive about it, but you do have to be firm and unwavering in your decision to protect your space. When you say no, let it be a complete sentence, not an invitation for negotiation. The next step in setting boundaries is recognizing that it's okay to say no without feeling the need to explain yourself. Narcissists are excellent at making us feel like we owe them something. Our time, our energy, our attention. They'll convince us that if we don't give in to their demands, we're being unreasonable or selfish. But this couldn't be further from the truth. Saying no is not only your right, it's a necessity in protecting your emotional resources. You don't owe anyone an explanation for your boundaries. A simple "I can't do that right now," or "that doesn't work for me," is enough. You don't need to justify your needs to anyone, especially not to someone who only wants to use you for their own gain. There's also a significant mental and emotional shift that occurs when you begin to embrace boundaries as a tool for self-respect, rather than as an act of rejection. When you recognize the importance of boundaries, you start seeing them not as walls to keep people out, but as fences that protect what's most important: your emotional well-being, your peace of mind, and your integrity. Boundaries are a way of honoring yourself, and in doing so, you set the stage for healthier, more balanced relationships. One of the most challenging things about setting boundaries with narcissists is that they often try to make you feel guilty for taking care of yourself. They'll accuse you of being cold, distant, or uncaring. They'll play the victim and try to turn the situation around so that you feel responsible for their emotional state. This is a manipulation tactic designed to make you doubt yourself and give in to their demands. But remember, a narcissist's emotional turmoil is their responsibility, not yours. When you set boundaries, you're not rejecting them as a person, you're rejecting their behavior. And that's an important distinction. You don't need to feel guilty for refusing to tolerate toxic behavior. Over time, as you continue to set and enforce your boundaries, you'll notice something remarkable. You'll begin to regain your sense of self. You'll become more confident in your decisions, less susceptible to manipulation, and more at peace with who you are. Narcissists may try to challenge your boundaries, but if you remain consistent and clear in your resolve, they will eventually learn that they cannot manipulate you into compliance. And when that happens, they lose their power over you. When we think about not engaging in a narcissist's games, what we're really talking about is taking control of the narrative. Narcissists often thrive on drama, conflict, and emotional chaos because it fuels their ego and their need for validation. They want to see us react, whether it's through anger, frustration, or confusion, because that reaction gives them a sense of power over us. But here's the key. By refusing to engage in their games, we take the power back. It's not just about staying calm in the face of provocation. It's about recognizing the game for what it is and choosing not to play. The first step in not engaging in their games is recognizing the manipulation for what it is. Narcissists are skilled at creating scenarios where they make you question your own reality. They distort facts and they twist your words. They might try to bait you with criticisms or even passive-aggressive remarks, all designed to draw you into an emotional reaction. But here's the thing, when you understand the pattern, it becomes easier to spot. Narcissists often use emotional manipulation tactics to provoke you, and once you see it, you can stop yourself from reacting the way they expect. Instead of getting caught up in the drama, you can pause and make a conscious decision to respond in a way that aligns with your values and priorities. One of the most powerful ways to avoid getting sucked into their games is to practice emotional detachment. This doesn't mean that you stop caring about the situation or the people involved. It means that you learn how to separate yourself emotionally from the manipulation. Narcissists feed off of our emotional responses because they give them a sense of control. But when you choose not to engage emotionally, you deny them the fuel they need to continue their game. Emotional detachment is not about being cold or distant. It's about choosing not to allow someone else's behavior to control your emotions. It's about maintaining your sense of self, regardless of what's happening around you. This might sound simple in theory, but in practice, it's incredibly challenging, especially when narcissists are skilled at pushing our buttons. They know exactly what to say and how to say it in order to get a reaction, but the key here is to not take the bait. The moment you respond emotionally, you're engaging with them on their terms, you're giving them exactly what they want, your energy, your attention, your time. And in doing so, you lose control of the situation. But when you refuse to play along, you maintain your own autonomy. You remain grounded in your own reality, and that's incredibly powerful. Another important aspect of not engaging in their games is to avoid falling into the trap of trying to win with a narcissist. Narcissists often thrive on the idea of being right or having the last word, and they'll do everything they can to draw you into a power struggle. They might twist your words, misrepresent facts, or even belittle your thoughts just to prove that they're superior. But here's the truth: with a narcissist, there is no winning. The goal is never to resolve the issue or find common ground. The goal is to maintain control. So when you try to win, you're playing into their hands, you're getting caught up in their narrative, and that's exactly what they want. Instead of trying to win, focus on disengaging from the game altogether. When you disengage, you take the narcissist out of the equation. You stop giving them the attention they crave, and you stop giving them the emotional validation they need to keep playing their manipulative games. The more you can resist the urge to engage, the more you'll begin to see that their tactics lose their power. Without your reaction, they have nothing to fuel their manipulation, and without that fuel, the game simply cannot continue. This doesn't mean that you ignore the narcissist or refuse to address important issues. It simply means that you stop getting caught up in the emotional roller coaster they create. You can still assert your boundaries, express your needs, and make decisions that are best for you, without getting pulled into their drama. The key is to remain calm, clear, and focused on what truly matters. When you do this, you begin to see the narcissist's behavior for what it is: empty and powerless without your emotional investment. By not engaging in their games, you take back your emotional energy. You stop letting them dictate your feelings, and you start to reclaim your peace of mind. Over time, this not only makes you stronger in dealing with narcissists, but it also makes you more resilient in all aspects of life. You become someone who doesn't let external forces control your emotional state. You become someone who chooses how to respond, regardless of what's going on around you. And that, my friends, is the ultimate power. Emotional resilience is one of the most underrated but essential qualities we can develop, especially when dealing with narcissists. We often hear the phrase "stay strong" or "keep your cool." But what does that actually mean in practice? And why is it so important when dealing with individuals who thrive on emotional manipulation? The reality is that narcissists are experts at creating emotional chaos. They know exactly how to push our buttons, exploit our vulnerabilities, and trigger reactions that ultimately give them the upper hand. But when we develop emotional resilience, we create a mental and emotional fortress that allows us to remain calm, centered, and unshaken in the face of their manipulations. At its core, emotional resilience is about being able to weather the storms of life without letting them break us. It's the ability to face challenges head on, acknowledge the emotions they trigger, but choose not to let those emotions control our responses. When we encounter a narcissist, the emotional impact can be intense. They may attempt to belittle us, make us feel inferior, or even manipulate our feelings to get what they want. But emotional resilience means that instead of reacting impulsively to these provocations, we take a step back, assess the situation, and respond in a way that aligns with our values rather than our emotions. One of the key aspects of emotional resilience is understanding that our emotions are natural, but they don't have to dictate our actions. It's okay to feel anger, frustration, or even hurt when someone is being manipulative or demeaning. Those feelings are valid and human. But emotional resilience isn't about suppressing or ignoring those emotions. It's about allowing ourselves to feel them, and then choosing how to respond. Narcissists will try to provoke you into emotional outbursts because that's where they gain control. But if we can recognize their tactics for what they are and acknowledge our feelings without letting them rule our actions, we disarm them. We refuse to give them the emotional reaction they want. The next step in developing emotional resilience is taking responsibility for our own emotions. Narcissists will often try to manipulate us into believing that their behavior is our fault, or that we somehow deserve the treatment they're giving us. They'll twist the situation and create confusion, making us doubt our own perceptions. But here's the key: emotional resilience requires us to own our feelings and recognize that no one can make us feel something unless we allow it. We are in charge of our emotional responses, and it's our responsibility to maintain control over them. When we understand this, we stop falling into the trap of emotional manipulation. We stop giving narcissists the power to dictate how we feel. Another important aspect of emotional resilience is the ability to maintain perspective. Narcissists often create drama and chaos, and it can be easy to get swept up in it. They'll accuse us of things we didn't do, twist our words, and play on our insecurities. But emotional resilience means stepping back and seeing the situation for what it truly is, not what the narcissist is trying to make it. It's about remembering that their behavior is a reflection of their own insecurities and needs, not an accurate reflection of our worth or actions. By maintaining this perspective, we prevent ourselves from getting emotionally entangled in their manipulations. It's also worth noting that emotional resilience is not something that happens overnight. It's a muscle that we have to strengthen over time. It requires practice, self-reflection, and an understanding of our own emotional triggers. The more we engage with narcissists and other emotionally challenging individuals, the more we begin to recognize the patterns in their behavior and the ways they attempt to manipulate us. This awareness is the first step in developing emotional resilience. Once we can see their tactics for what they are, we can begin to respond with calmness and clarity rather than getting swept up in the emotional whirlwind they create. Part of developing emotional resilience also involves nurturing our own emotional well-being outside of these interactions. The stronger our sense of self, the more emotionally resilient we become. This means investing time in activities that bring us joy, peace, and fulfillment. Whether it's through hobbies, exercise, meditation, or spending time with people who uplift and support us. When we feel emotionally grounded and fulfilled in our own lives, we become less susceptible to the narcissist's tactics. Our sense of worth doesn't come from them, and so their attempts to undermine us hold less power. Lastly, emotional resilience is deeply connected to our ability to forgive, not in the sense of excusing the narcissist's behavior, but in the sense of freeing ourselves from the emotional burden of holding onto resentment and anger. When we hold onto negative emotions, we give them power over us. Forgiveness doesn't mean we condone what has been done to us. It simply means that we refuse to let their actions control our emotional state. By forgiving, we reclaim our power and choose peace over the toxic emotions that narcissists try to stir up within us. Emotional resilience is the quiet strength that allows us to rise above the chaos that narcissists try to create. It's the ability to stay true to ourselves, to remain grounded in our values, and to respond with clarity and calm, no matter what the situation. When we develop this resilience, we stop being reactive pawns in their games and become strong, intentional individuals who refuse to be manipulated. This is the power of emotional resilience, and it is one of the most vital tools we can use in maintaining our peace and our sense of self. The importance of surrounding ourselves with supportive, healthy people cannot be overstated, especially when we are trying to navigate the toxic influence of narcissists. It's easy to forget the power of our social circle until we find ourselves entangled in relationships that drain us, confuse us, or leave us questioning our self-worth. Narcissists thrive on isolation. They often target individuals who feel alone, vulnerable, or disconnected, and they use this to their advantage. They might manipulate us into thinking that they are the only ones who truly understand us or that we are incapable of finding anyone better. But the truth is, the right people in our lives act as a powerful shield against their influence. Having a support system is like building a strong foundation for a house. If you have a solid group of people around you who believe in you, who affirm your worth, and who encourage your growth, you become less susceptible to the emotional manipulation that narcissists rely on. These are the people who will remind you of who you really are when the narcissist tries to distort your sense of reality. They provide a mirror that reflects your true self, free from the distortion and toxicity that narcissists often create. One of the most critical things to recognize is that a strong support system isn't just about being around people. It's about being around the right people. Narcissists often target individuals who are empathetic, kind, or emotionally open. These qualities make us more likely to give them the benefit of the doubt. or to engage in the drama and chaos they create. However, when we surround ourselves with people who have a healthy sense of boundaries, who practice honesty and authenticity, we begin to develop a stronger sense of what's acceptable and what's not. Healthy relationships reinforce our sense of self and teach us how to interact with others in a way that protects our emotional well-being. Supportive friends, family, and mentors help us see things more clearly, especially when we are emotionally clouded by a narcissist's tactics. A narcissist will try to convince us that we are too sensitive, too reactive, or too emotional. They will gaslight us into doubting our perceptions and second-guessing our reality. But when we have people we trust, people who are grounded, emotionally healthy, and wise, we have a mirror to remind us that we are not crazy. They help us see the situation objectively and offer advice that keeps us grounded. Another important aspect of building a healthy support system is the ability to set boundaries with those around us. Just as we set boundaries with narcissists, we need to be able to do the same with friends, family, and colleagues. A strong support system is not about being surrounded by people who are always agreeing with us or enabling our behaviors. It's about having people who hold us accountable, who encourage us to grow, and who challenge us to make decisions that align with our values. These people will respect our boundaries, but they'll also push us to become the best version of ourselves, even when it's difficult. Moreover, surrounding ourselves with supportive people means creating an environment where we can express ourselves freely, without fear of judgment or manipulation. Narcissists often thrive in environments where their behavior goes unchecked, where they can gaslight, manipulate, and control others without anyone calling them out. But when we have a supportive network, we are less likely to fall into this trap. We have people who will stand by us, validate our experiences, and help us make decisions that preserve our integrity. This doesn't mean that we should rely entirely on others to validate our worth. It's important to build self-worth from within. But having a support system amplifies our ability to stand firm in our sense of self and provides us with a resource when we feel uncertain. They remind us that we're not alone, that our experiences matter, and that we are deserving of love and respect. In the face of narcissistic manipulation, this kind of support is invaluable. It gives us the strength to stand up for ourselves, to assert our boundaries, and to walk away from toxic situations. Additionally, when we are surrounded by people who respect us and value our well-being, we are less likely to be drawn into the narcissist's web of emotional chaos. Narcissists love to isolate their targets, to create a narrative where the only person they can turn to is the narcissist themselves. But when we are part of a supportive network, we break that cycle. We're not dependent on the narcissist for validation or approval because we have people who uplift us and encourage us to be our true selves. One of the most empowering aspects of a strong support system is the way it helps us maintain perspective. Narcissists thrive on creating confusion, chaos, and emotional instability. But when we have the right people in our lives, they help us regain clarity. They remind us of what's true, what's real, and what's worth fighting for. Their support helps us navigate the complexities of dealing with narcissists and gives us the courage to stand firm in our decisions. In the end, the key to not losing ourselves when dealing with narcissists is recognizing that we don't have to do it alone. Surrounding ourselves with people who genuinely care about our well-being, who uplift us, and who help us stay grounded, provides a strong defense against the narcissist's emotional manipulation. A healthy support system is not just a luxury, it's a necessity. And when we create and nurture these relationships, we are empowered to face the challenges of life, including narcissistic manipulation, with confidence and strength. The ability to let go of the need for external validation is one of the most freeing and empowering choices we can make, especially when dealing with narcissists. Narcissists thrive on validation. They need constant praise, admiration, and attention to feed their fragile ego. They will do whatever it takes to manipulate those around them into providing this validation, often at the expense of others' esteem, well-being, and sense of identity. In many cases, they turn us into a mirror that reflects only their own desires, emotions, and needs, rather than allowing us to express our authentic selves. But here's the thing: when we begin to release our dependence on external validation, we reclaim our sense of self. We stop letting others define our worth and start defining it ourselves. It's important to recognize that seeking external validation isn't inherently wrong. We all want to feel valued and appreciated, and it's natural to seek approval from those we care about. However, when we depend on external validation for our self-worth, we make ourselves vulnerable to manipulation. Narcissists are experts at identifying this vulnerability. They know how to play to our insecurities, how to make us feel seen and important, and then how to pull it all away when it suits them. They use validation as a weapon, giving it only when it serves their purpose and withholding it when it doesn't. This cycle can leave us feeling confused, drained, and disoriented. The moment we shift our focus away from seeking approval from others, we regain control over our emotional landscape. We begin to understand that our worth doesn't come from the praise of others. It comes from within. Our value isn't determined by what others think of us, but by who we are at our core. The more we internalize this, the less power narcissists have over us. When we no longer rely on them, or anyone else for our validation, their manipulative tactics lose their effectiveness. They can no longer control us by giving us just enough attention to keep us hooked. We're no longer chasing their approval because we no longer need it. This shift also enables us to make decisions that align with our authentic selves, rather than making choices based on the fear of disapproval or rejection. Narcissists want us to be constantly seeking their affirmation, to mold ourselves into the person they want us to be. They want us to prioritize their needs and desires above our own, so they can maintain control. But when we let go of the need for their validation, we start making choices that reflect our true values, desires, and goals. We stop performing for their approval, and instead, we start living in alignment with who we really are. Letting go of external validation doesn't mean that we stop caring about others or become emotionally distant. We are social beings, and it's natural to want connection, recognition, and appreciation. What it means, however, is that we stop allowing other people's opinions to dictate our emotional well-being. We no longer let someone else's approval or rejection define our mood, our worth, or our sense of identity. This is crucial when dealing with narcissists, who are often quick to make us feel inferior, unimportant, or unworthy, especially when we don't meet their expectations. When we're no longer attached to the need for their approval, their criticism or rejection can no longer shake us to our core. We learn to view it for what it is, just another manipulation tactic, and we don't allow it to affect our sense of self. One of the most powerful ways to let go of external validation is to cultivate self-compassion. When we are kind and understanding with ourselves, we become less reliant on the praise and approval of others. We begin to recognize that we are enough just as we are. It's about acknowledging our strengths, accepting our imperfections, and giving ourselves the grace to be human. Self-compassion allows us to step into our own power, free from the need for external validation, and empowers us to make decisions that are aligned with our true desires rather than with the desire for approval. As we continue to practice this, we start to see that the narcissist's validation is hollow and fleeting. It's designed to keep us hooked, to keep us chasing after something that isn't real. The more we detach from this cycle, the more we begin to see it for what it truly is: manipulation. Narcissists want us to be dependent on them for our sense of worth, but when we release this dependence, we reclaim our own power. We no longer give them the opportunity to control us with their unpredictable and self-serving validation. Ultimately, the goal is to become so confident in our own worth that we no longer need anyone's approval to feel good about ourselves. We are able to appreciate the love and recognition we receive from others, but we no longer rely on it to define who we are. The moment we make this shift, we free ourselves from the narcissist's grip and reclaim our emotional autonomy. We stop seeking validation from others and start giving it to ourselves. And that, my friends, is the key to not losing yourself in a world where narcissists are constantly trying to redefine you.